What if the cruelest thing about being loved by a narcissist isn't what they did to you, but the possibility that some part of it was real? Because here's the question that haunts almost everyone who has ever been in a relationship with a narcissist. Not, did they manipulate me? You know the answer to that. Not, should I have left sooner? That question belongs to a therapist's office, not a comment section. The question that keeps coming back, quietly, usually at night, is this: did they ever actually love me? Was any of it real, or was I just useful? This is one of the most searched questions in relationship psychology, and the honest answer, the one that actually holds up against what neuroscience and clinical research show us, is not the clean, satisfying, no, they're incapable of love, move on, that everyone keeps giving you. It's something more complicated, more painful in some ways, and ultimately more useful. Let's go there. The internet has a very clean answer to this question. No. Narcissists cannot love. They are incapable of genuine emotion. Everything they showed you was performance. You were supply, not a person to them. Accept it and move on. This answer is satisfying in a certain way. It draws a clear line. It removes ambiguity. It gives you permission to stop grieving something you're told never existed. But it has a significant problem. It isn't entirely true. And the part of you that lived inside that relationship, that experienced moments that felt genuinely real, already knows it isn't entirely true, which is part of why you're still asking the question. The more accurate and more clinically supported answer is this: narcissists exist on a spectrum. They feel emotions differently than most people rather than not feeling them at all, and what they experience as love is genuinely real to them, while being fundamentally different from what a securely attached person means by the word. That distinction, real but different, is where the most important understanding lives, and it requires us to look at what is actually happening inside the narcissistic psyche, rather than simply cataloging what they do to others. To understand whether a narcissist can love, you first need to understand what they are working with internally, because the architecture is genuinely different. At the center of narcissistic psychology is what clinicians describe as a fragmented self, a core identity that never fully cohered, usually because early experiences of being seen, validated, and loved were inconsistent, conditional, or deeply inadequate. The result is a psyche built around a profound interior emptiness and an unbearable fragility of self-esteem. Not the arrogance the outside world sees. That is the structure built over the emptiness, the compensatory grandiosity that keeps the wound out of view. Underneath the confidence, the entitlement, the apparent self-sufficiency is a self that is extraordinarily vulnerable to feelings of inadequacy, shame, and abandonment. Now, here is where it connects directly to love. Because of this internal architecture, the narcissist's experience of emotional connection is shaped by a fundamental psychological limitation, not a moral one, but a structural one. They experience what researchers sometimes call object inconstancy, difficulty maintaining a stable, whole, consistent image of another person across time and emotional states. In practical terms, this means that when you are useful to them, when you are validating them, when you are reflecting back the image they need, you feel real to them. You matter. Something that functions like love is present. When you fail to provide that, when you become a source of criticism or disappointment or unmet need, you stop feeling fully real to them. The emotional connection doesn't just cool, it can invert entirely, and with a speed that is bewildering to the people who experience it. This is not a performance of love followed by a dropping of the mask. It is a genuinely unstable capacity for consistent emotional experience of another person as a full, separate human being. Clinical observation and research suggest that narcissistic individuals experience something in the territory of love, but it tends to fall into recognizable patterns, each of which is real in its own way, and each of which is limited in a specific way. The first is acquisitive love, love as reflection. In the early stages of connection, a narcissist can experience something that is functionally indistinguishable from falling in love, because in many ways it is. The neurochemistry fires, the attention is genuine, the fascination is real, but what they are primarily in love with is what you represent and what you reflect back. Your beauty, status, or warmth validates their self image. Your admiration confirms the grandiose self they need to believe in. Your presence makes them feel a particular way about themselves, and that feeling is what they are attached to. This is not pure performance, the emotion is real, but its object is ultimately themselves, experienced through you. When you change, when you stop reflecting the image they need, when your own needs and flaws and complexity become unavoidable, the love encounters a crisis it doesn't have the internal resources to survive. The second is possessive love, love as ownership. Some narcissists, particularly those with stronger attachment needs alongside their narcissistic traits, experience love in a way that is intense, consuming, and genuine, but fundamentally territorial. They love you the way someone might love something precious and irreplaceable that belongs to them. The feeling is real. The protectiveness is real. The pain of potential loss is real. But the love is oriented toward possession rather than liberation. It cannot comfortably hold your separateness, your independent will, your existence as a full person with needs and a life that doesn't center them. This is why possessive narcissistic love often intensifies at the point of separation. The threat of loss activates the attachment in a way that can look, from the outside, exactly like the love you always wanted. It is not a manipulation in that moment, it is panic, and panic at the loss of something is not the same thing as love for a person. The third is nostalgic love, love for the idea of you. This is the most heartbreaking category and the one that generates the most confusion in the aftermath of these relationships. Many narcissists, particularly in later life or after significant loss, experience genuine grief and longing for specific people they hurt or lost. They remember the relationship with something that functions like tenderness. They may say, with apparent sincerity, that they loved you, that you were important, that they regret what happened. This is not necessarily a manipulation. It may be entirely true as they experience truth. What it reflects is the narcissistic tendency to love the past version of a person, the idealized image, frozen at its best, more easily than they could ever love the living, complex, present reality of the actual human being, the person who hurt them, needed them, pushed back, had bad days, required accommodation. That person was difficult to love. The memory, simplified and idealized, is easier. You cannot talk about whether narcissists can love without talking about empathy, because love, in the way most of us mean it, requires a particular kind of empathic capacity that narcissism specifically limits. But here, too, the picture is more nuanced than the common narrative. Research has drawn a distinction between two types of empathy that are relevant here. Cognitive empathy, the ability to understand intellectually what another person is feeling, to model their emotional state, to predict how they will respond, is often intact or even highly developed in narcissistic individuals. This is part of what makes them so effective at the early stages of connection and so precise in knowing exactly where to press later. Affective empathy, the ability to actually feel with another person, to be moved by their pain, to experience their distress as something that matters independently of how it affects you, is where narcissistic individuals show consistent and significant limitation. What this means in the context of love is important. A narcissist can often understand that you are hurting. They can model it, describe it, even use the language of it with apparent accuracy. But the understanding does not reliably produce the visceral, motivating care that affective empathy generates, the experience of your pain as something that matters in its own right, that changes what they want to do, that places your well-being alongside their own as a genuine priority. This is the gap at the center of love with a narcissist, not the absence of all emotion, the absence of the specific empathic capacity that transforms emotion into sustainable, other centered care. Here is where we need to shift from psychology to something more personal, because you didn't come to this video purely for a clinical framework. You came because you are trying to make sense of something that happened to you, something that felt real and that hurt in a way that only real things hurt. So let's address the question directly, the way you've actually been asking it. Was what they felt for you real? In the only way they were capable of, yes, probably. Something happened when they were with you that was not purely transactional, not entirely performance. There were moments of genuine feeling, genuine connection, genuine attachment. You were not simply deceived from the beginning by someone feeling nothing. Does that mean they loved you the way you needed to be loved? No. And this is the part that needs to be held clearly. Whatever they felt, and it may have been real within its limits, it was not capable of consistently prioritizing your well being. It was not capable of holding your full complexity without recoiling. It was not capable of surviving your needs when those needs conflicted with theirs. It could not maintain itself through accountability or repair. Love that cannot do those things, whatever it is, whatever it feels like in its best moments, is not sufficient. And it is not your fault that it wasn't sufficient. You did not ask for too much. You asked for what love is actually supposed to be able to do. Does knowing this change anything? It should change one specific thing: the story you tell yourself about your own judgment. You did not fall for a fiction. You responded to something that was real, even if it was limited. You loved someone who had genuine qualities worth loving, even if those qualities could not sustain what you needed. Your instincts were not entirely wrong. They were responding to real signals, even if those signals were incomplete. The grief is appropriate, the anger is appropriate, the confusion about how something that felt so real could have hurt so much, that confusion is appropriate too. It felt real because parts of it were. This is the question underneath the question, the one people are really asking when they ask whether narcissists can love. Because what they really want to know is there a version of this story where it gets better? The honest, research informed answer is rarely, significantly, and almost never without years of intensive therapeutic work that the narcissistic person has to genuinely choose for themselves, not as a strategy to keep you, but as a real confrontation with the wound beneath the structure. Meaningful change in narcissistic personality organization requires the person to be willing to experience the very thing their entire psychology is built to avoid: the full weight of their shame, their emptiness, their fear of being truly seen and found inadequate. This is extraordinarily painful work. Most people with strong narcissistic structures resist it, not because they are evil, but because it requires dismantling the only psychological home they have ever known. It happens, rarely, with the right therapeutic relationship, sustained over years, initiated by genuine internal crisis rather than external pressure. Research on therapeutic outcomes with NPD is cautiously optimistic in a very limited range of cases. But here is what you must hear clearly: the possibility of their change is not your responsibility to wait for. Their capacity to grow is not your problem to solve. And staying in a harmful dynamic in the hope that your love will be the thing that finally reaches them is not love on your part. It is self-sacrifice operating under love's name. You are allowed to grieve what they couldn't give you. You are allowed to understand them with compassion, and you are simultaneously allowed to remove yourself from the damage. These things are not in conflict. So, can a narcissist feel love? Something, yes. A real something, limited in its capacity for consistency, for true other-centeredness, for surviving the full complexity of another human being, but real within those limits. And that reality is both the reason it hurt so much and the reason you don't have to be ashamed of how long you stayed, how much you gave, or how deeply you felt. You were not loving an illusion. You were loving a person whose capacity for love was fractured in ways that had nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with wounds that were created long before you arrived. The most important thing you can take from this video is not a verdict on them. It's a release for you. Release from the question of whether you were imagining it. Release from the belief that if you'd been different, more patient, more understanding, more something, it would have been enough. If this gave you something, clarity or language or just the feeling of being understood, share it. Someone in your life is asking this exact question in the middle of the night and doesn't know where to look. Subscribe, because this channel is committed to going deeper than the surface on the psychology that shapes the most important parts of our lives. There's no right answer, but I want to hear yours.